There's a moment in everyone's life when the ground beneath your feet suddenly feels uncertain, when the roles you've played, the identities you've carefully constructed, the very person you thought you were begins to crack like old paint on a weathered wall. For me, that moment came in a Harvard laboratory, surrounded by the trappings of academic success, yet feeling more lost than ever. What I discovered wasn't just about consciousness or psychology, it was about coming home to who you really are beneath all the masks. The journey from Dr. Richard Alpert to Ram Dass wasn't just a name change. It was a complete dissolution of everything I thought mattered, only to find what actually does. Sometimes we must lose ourselves completely to find our way back to love. I was the golden boy of Harvard's psychology department, publishing papers, commanding respect, living the American dream of intellectual achievement. My office overlooked the Charles River, my credentials were impeccable, and my future seemed carved in stone. Yet every morning I'd wake up with this gnawing emptiness, this sense that I was playing a role in someone else's movie. The more successful I became, the more I felt like I was suffocating in a suit that no longer fit. You know this feeling, don't you? That moment when you realize the life you've built so carefully is actually a beautiful prison. The career that once excited you now feels like sleepwalking. The relationships that once nourished you now feel like performances. The very identity you've spent decades crafting suddenly feels as foreign as a stranger's reflection in the mirror. I remember sitting in faculty meetings listening to brilliant minds debate theories about human consciousness, while feeling utterly disconnected from my own. We were studying the nature of awareness while remaining completely unaware of our own spiritual poverty. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, a Harvard professor teaching about the mind, yet I had no idea who I really was beneath all the degrees and accolades. The turning point came not through any grand revelation, but through a simple, devastating question that arose during meditation. Who is this person called Richard Alpert? I searched through my memories, my achievements, my relationships, my beliefs, and found nothing solid. Every identity I grabbed onto dissolved like smoke. The professor, the son, the intellectual, the authority figure, all of them were just costumes I'd learned to wear so well that I'd forgotten they weren't actually me. This wasn't a philosophical crisis. It was an existential earthquake. Everything I thought I knew about myself crumbled, leaving me standing in the rubble of my own carefully constructed self-image. The success that had once validated my existence now felt meaningless. The respect of my peers became as hollow as applause in an empty theater. But here's what I learned in that devastating moment of dissolution. Sometimes the greatest gift life can give you is the complete collapse of who you think you are. Because only when the false self crumbles can you discover what remains. This is the ultimate spiritual maturity, not the achievement of some permanent state of enlightenment, but the ability to find peace and joy in the constant dance of appearing and disappearing, of coming and going, of being and letting go. When you can dance with impermanence, you discover that change isn't the enemy of happiness. It's the very condition that makes happiness possible. The spiritual journey always leads back to where you started, but with completely different eyes. After all the seeking, all the teachers, all the practices, all the insights, you discover that what you were looking for was never hidden. It was always right here, closer than your own breath, more intimate than your own thoughts, more present than your own presence. The eternal now isn't a mystical concept. It's the most obvious thing in the world. It's the only time that actually exists, the only moment you've ever experienced, the only place where life actually happens. The past exists only as memory arising now. The future exists only as imagination happening now. Even your thoughts about the past and future are occurring in this eternal present moment. Most of us live everywhere except where we are. We're lost in memories of what happened, worried about what might happen, planning for what should happen, regretting what didn't happen. We treat the present moment like a waiting room for our real life to begin. But this moment isn't preparation for something else. It's the main event. The practice of presence isn't about forcing yourself to pay attention or trying to stop your thoughts. It's about recognizing that you're already here, already present, already complete. It's about relaxing into the natural awareness that's always been witnessing your thoughts, emotions, and experiences. It's about coming home to yourself, not as a project to be completed, but as a reality to be recognized. When I first learned to meditate, I thought the goal was to achieve some special state of consciousness. I was trying to get somewhere, to become someone, to experience something extraordinary. But what I discovered is that the most extraordinary thing is the ordinary awareness that's reading these words right now. The consciousness that's aware of your breath, that's noticing the sounds around you, that's experiencing these thoughts as they arise. This is the miracle you've been seeking. This awareness doesn't come and go. It's not dependent on your mood, your circumstances, or your spiritual achievements. It's the constant background of all experience, the screen on which the movie of your life is playing. When you recognize this awareness as your true nature, you stop trying to improve it, fix it, or get somewhere else. You simply rest in what you already are. The eternal now is always available because it's what you are. Not the person you think you are, not the body you inhabit, not the mind you think with, but the awareness that's aware of all these things. This awareness is timeless, spaceless, unconditional. It's the same awareness that was present in your childhood, the same awareness that will be present in your old age, the same awareness that's present in every being everywhere. Coming home to presence is the end of spiritual seeking and the beginning of spiritual being. You stop trying to get somewhere and start appreciating where you are. You stop trying to become someone and start recognizing who you've always been. You stop trying to achieve enlightenment and start expressing it naturally in each moment. This isn't a state you have to maintain or a practice you have to perfect. It's the recognition of what's always been true. You are not in the present moment. You are the present moment. You are not experiencing awareness. You are awareness experiencing itself. You are not coming home to presence. You are the home that presence never left. Here we are at the end of our journey together, though endings are just new beginnings wearing different clothes. If you've stayed with me this far, you've already begun the most important journey of your life, the journey from seeking love to being love, from searching for yourself to recognizing yourself, from trying to come home to realizing you never left. The truth is, I haven't told you anything you didn't already know. Somewhere in the depths of your being, you've always known that you are more than your thoughts, more than your fears, more than your achievements, more than your failures. You've always known that love is the only thing that truly matters, that presence is the only place where life happens, that you are connected to everything and everyone in ways that the mind can barely comprehend. What I've offered you is simply permission to trust what you already know, permission to let go of who you think you should be and rest in who you actually are, permission to love without conditions, to serve without agenda, to be a present without trying to fix or change anything, permission to lose yourself completely in the vast ocean of love that you've always been. The path ahead of you isn't about perfecting yourself or achieving some special state. It's about becoming more ordinary, more human, more available to the simple miracle of being alive. It's about finding God in the grocery store, enlightenment in the laundry, the sacred in the completely mundane. It's about recognizing that every moment is a doorway, every breath is a prayer, every encounter is a chance to practice love. Remember, we're all just walking each other home. The person sitting next to you on the bus, the cashier at the store, the family member who drives you crazy, the stranger who smiles at you on the street, they're all fellow travelers on this journey of awakening. Some appear to be ahead of you, some behind, but we're all heading to the same destination. The recognition that we were never separate, we were never broken, we were never anything other than love itself having a human experience. So be gentle with yourself. Be patient with your process. Be kind to your confusion and compassionate with your mistakes. The spiritual path isn't about getting it right, it's about getting it real. It's about showing up authentically to whatever life brings, staying open even when it hurts, and remembering that every experience is just love teaching you more about love. The greatest gift you can give the world is your own awakening. Not awakening to something else, but awakening to what you already are. When you recognize yourself as love, you can't help but see love everywhere. When you know yourself as awareness, you can't help but respect the awareness in others. When you understand yourself as presence, you can't help but be fully available to whatever the moment offers. This is the ultimate invitation, to lose yourself so completely in love that there's no one left to be found. To dissolve so thoroughly into presence that there's no one left to be present. To surrender so completely to what you are that there's no one left to surrender. This isn't the end of you, it's the beginning of you. With a capital Y, the you that was never born and will never die, the you that is love itself wearing your particular face. Welcome home, dear friend. You were never really gone. Only when the masks fall away can you see the face that was there before you were born. The confusion that followed wasn't a sign that something was wrong, it was a sign that something was finally right. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't pretending to have answers I didn't possess. I wasn't maintaining a facade of certainty about mysteries I barely understood. I was simply, authentically lost, and that lostness was the most honest thing I'd felt in years. Most people run from this kind of uncertainty like it's a disease. We scramble to reconstruct our identities, to find new roles to play, new ways to prove our worth. But what if uncertainty itself is the doorway to something far more profound than any identity we could construct? What if confusion is actually clarity wearing a disguise? I began to understand that my confusion wasn't a problem to be solved, but a sacred space to be explored. In not knowing who I was finally free to discover who I might become. The questions that had once terrified me, who am I? What's the point? Why am I here? Became invitations rather than accusations. This is the medicine of uncertainty. It strips away everything false so that what's true can finally emerge. It dissolves the rigid boundaries of the ego so that something vast and mysterious can breathe through you. Your confusion isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign that you're finally ready to stop pretending and start discovering. The path through uncertainty isn't about finding quick answers or rebuilding your identity on more solid ground. It's about learning to be comfortable in the vast space of not knowing, where miracles have room to unfold. It's about discovering that beneath all your roles and identities, something eternal and unshakable has always been present, waiting patiently for you to come home. When the false self begins to crack, don't rush to repay. Hear it, let it fall away like old skin that no longer serves you. In that space of beautiful uncertainty, you'll find something that no success, no achievement, no external validation could ever provide, the direct experience of your own infinite nature. The mirror of suffering has a strange way of showing us things we could never see when life was comfortable. Physical pain, emotional heartbreak, loss, disappointment, these aren't mistakes in the grand design of existence. They're invitations to meet ourselves at the deepest level, to discover who we are when all our strategies for avoiding discomfort have failed. My own encounter with this mirror came in waves. First, there was the psychological suffering of realizing that my entire identity was built on quicksand. Then came the physical challenges, the relationship failures, the professional setbacks that followed my departure from Harvard. Each wave of difficulty felt like it might drown me, yet somehow I kept finding that I could breathe underwater. Suffering, I discovered, is not just random cruelty. It's the universe's way of showing us where we're still attached to things that cannot last. Every pain point is a teacher. Every disappointment a curriculum designed specifically for your awakening. The parts of yourself that you've been trying to protect, to maintain, to present to the world, these are precisely the parts that need to dissolve for your true self to emerge. When my stroke happened years later, I initially felt betrayed. Here I was, someone who had dedicated his life to spiritual practice, to consciousness, to helping others wake up, and my body had failed me so completely. I couldn't speak properly, couldn't move as I once had, couldn't maintain the image of the wise teacher that people expected. The mirror of suffering was showing me yet another layer of identification that needed to be released. But in that enforced slowing down, something beautiful happened. I began to meet myself in a completely new way. The part of me that had always been rushing toward the next insight, the next teaching, the next moment of connection. That part was forced to simply be present with what was. The suffering stripped away my ability to perform my spirituality and left me with only the raw experience of being human. This is what suffering does when we stop running from it. It reveals the love that has always been present beneath our strategies for avoiding pain. It shows us that our true nature isn't found in our ability to maintain control or avoid discomfort, but in our capacity to remain open-hearted even when life breaks us open. The person you meet in the mirror of suffering isn't the person you thought you were. It's not the successful one, the spiritual one, the one who has it all figured out. It's the tender, vulnerable, utterly human one who has been hiding beneath all your accomplishments and pretensions. This is the you that doesn't need to prove anything, achieve anything, or become anything other than what you already are. Your suffering isn't a punishment for past mistakes or a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sacred invitation to come home to yourself, to discover the love that exists even in the midst of pain, to find the part of you that remains untouched by any external circumstance. In the mirror of suffering, you finally see the face you've been searching for your entire life and realize it's been looking back at you all along. There's a peculiar freedom that comes when you realize you don't have to carry the weight of being somebody anymore. Most of us spend our entire lives trying to become someone important, someone worthy, someone who matters. We collect experiences, achievements, relationships, and spiritual insights like badges of honor, building an identity we can present to the world with pride. But what happens when you discover that the very act of trying to be someone is what's keeping you from knowing who you truly are? The art of dying while living isn't about physical death. It's about the daily practice of letting go of who you think you are so that who you really are can breathe. It's about releasing your grip on the story you've been telling yourself about your life and allowing something far more mysterious and beautiful to emerge. I learned this lesson gradually, then all at once. Each day of spiritual practice became a small death. The death of the need to be right, the death of the need to be special, the death of the need to be understood. Every meditation was a rehearsal for the ultimate letting go, a practice in releasing my attachment to being Richard Alpert, the Harvard professor, or even Ram Dass, the spiritual teacher. The ego doesn't die willingly. It fights for its life by convincing you that without it, you'll cease to exist. It whispers fears about becoming nobody, about losing your edge, your personality, your very essence. But what actually dies is only the false self, the collection of roles, opinions, and identities that you've mistaken for who you are. What remains is infinitely more precious, the awareness that has been witnessing all of those identities come and go. This daily dying is like learning to swim by drowning over and over again, only to discover that the water you thought would kill you is actually your natural element. Each time you release your grip on who you think you should be, you float more easily in the ocean of what you actually are. The process isn't comfortable, letting go never is, but it's the only way to discover the vastness that's been waiting beneath your small sense of self. The beauty of this practice is that it transforms everything. Your relationships become laboratories for love rather than negotiations for validation. Your work becomes service rather than self-promotion. Your challenges become opportunities for deeper surrender rather than problems to be solved. You begin to live as if you're already dead, which paradoxically makes you more alive than you've ever been. When you're no longer trying to protect or project an image, you become available for authentic connection. When you're no longer attached to outcomes, you can act from pure love rather than hidden agendas. When you're no longer afraid of losing yourself, you can give yourself completely to each moment, each person, each opportunity to serve. This is the ultimate teaching that love offers. It demands everything and gives you everything in return. Not the sentimental love that seeks to possess or be possessed, but the radical love that dissolves the boundaries between self and other, between giver and receiver, between the one who loves and the one who is loved. For most of my early life, I thought love was something I could master, understand, and deploy strategically. I approached relationships like experiments, trying to figure out the formulas for connection and affection. I wanted to be loved, to be seen as lovable, to accumulate evidence that I was worthy of love. But this approach to love is like trying to catch the wind in a net. The very effort defeats the purpose. Real love isn't something you do or something you get. It's something you are, something you discover when you stop trying to be anything else. It's the natural state that emerges when all the barriers to love have dissolved. And those barriers aren't external. They're the internal walls you've built to protect yourself from being hurt, disappointed, or rejected. The journey from knowing about love to being love is the most difficult curriculum you'll ever undertake. It requires you to release your need to be right, to be special, to be in control. It asks you to stop trying to get love and start giving it unconditionally. It demands that you love even when you don't feel like it, even when you're not loved in return, even when loving seems to bring more pain than pleasure. This isn't about becoming a doormat or losing your discernment. It's about recognizing that your capacity to love is independent of any external circumstances. You can love the person who cuts you off in traffic, not because they deserve it, but because love is who you are. You can love the friend who betrays you, not because betrayal is acceptable, but because your love isn't conditional on their behavior. The ultimate teaching of love is that it transforms everything it touches, including the one who loves. When you love without agenda, you discover that you're not separate from what you love. When you love without conditions, you find that love itself is the only condition necessary for joy. When you love without expectation, you realize that love is its own reward. This kind of love isn't soft or weak. It's the most powerful force in the universe. It can heal decades of hurt in a single moment of genuine connection. It can transform enemies into friends, strangers into family, ordinary moments into sacred encounters. But it requires the complete surrender of your need to be right, to be safe, to be in control. The path of love is the path of ultimate vulnerability. It asks you to keep your heart open even when it's breaking, to remain compassionate even when you're angry, to continue serving even when you feel unappreciated. This isn't martyrdom. It's the recognition that love is the only thing that satisfies the deepest hunger of the soul. The heart that has never been broken is like a seed that has never been planted. It contains infinite potential, but it remains locked away from the very conditions that would allow it to flourish. Your heartbreak isn't a sign that you've loved unwisely. It's a sign that you've loved truly, and that love is doing its sacred work of breaking you open to something far greater than your small self could contain. I used to think that spiritual practice was about protecting the heart, about finding ways to love without getting hurt. But what I discovered is that the heart is meant to be broken, not destroyed, but cracked open like a walnut so that the sweetness inside can nourish the world. Every heartbreak is an invitation to love more deeply, not more carefully. The wisdom of broken hearts is this: they let more light in. When your heart breaks, it doesn't become smaller, it becomes more spacious. The cracks become windows through which grace can enter. The pain becomes a teacher showing you exactly where your love still has conditions, where your compassion still has limits, where your acceptance still has boundaries. After my stroke, I experienced a different kind of heartbreak. Not the romantic kind that comes from lost love, but the existential kind that comes from losing your sense of competence, your ability to be who you thought you were. I couldn't speak the way I once had, couldn't move with the same ease, couldn't maintain the image of the wise teacher that people expected. My heart broke for the person I could no longer be. But in that breaking, something miraculous happened. I began to love myself in a completely new way, not for what I could do or achieve, but simply for the fact of my existence. I began to receive love from others not as payment for my wisdom or service, but as the natural flow of human connection. I discovered that being broken doesn't make you less lovable. It makes you more human, more accessible, more real. This is the paradox of broken hearts. They are simultaneously the most painful and the most beautiful thing that can happen to a human being. They show you that you're capable of caring so deeply that loss becomes unbearable. They reveal the vast capacity for love that exists within you. They teach you that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the birthplace of compassion. Your broken heart isn't something to fix or heal quickly. It's something to honor, to learn from, to allow to transform you completely. The pain you feel is proportional to the love you've given. The grief you experience is evidence of the beauty you've encountered. The heartbreak you endure is the price of admission to the deeper dimensions of what it means to be human. When you stop trying to protect your heart and start offering it as a gift, everything changes. You discover that heartbreak is temporary, but the love that caused it is eternal. You learn that you can survive any loss except the loss of your capacity to love. You realize that the broken heart is actually the open heart, and the open heart is the gateway to everything you've been seeking. The greatest spiritual secret I've learned is that service isn't something you do to help others. It's something you do to free yourself. When you serve without any agenda other than love, you discover that giving and receiving are the same action viewed from different angles. You find that helping others is actually the most efficient way to help yourself, not because you get something in return, but because service dissolves the illusion of separation that causes all suffering. I stumbled onto this truth accidentally when I returned from India, transformed by my encounter with my guru, but uncertain how to integrate what I'd learned. I began sharing my experiences not because I felt qualified to teach, but because I couldn't contain what had happened to me. I started serving others not because I was enlightened, but because service was the only way I knew how to honor what had been given to me. What I discovered was that every act of genuine service is simultaneously an act of self-liberation. When you feed the hungry, you discover that you've been starving for purpose. When you comfort the grieving, you find healing for your own unprocessed losses. When you serve the poor, you realize how rich you actually are. When you offer love to the lonely, you discover that you're never truly alone. This isn't about keeping score or expecting karmic returns. It's about recognizing that the boundaries between self and other are constructs of the mind, not realities of the heart. When you serve another person, you're actually serving yourself, because at the deepest level, there is no other. The homeless person you feed is the part of you that feels displaced. The addict you help is the part of you that seeks escape. The dying person you comfort is the part of you that fears mortality. Service becomes a spiritual practice when it's done without any sense of superiority, without any need to fix or save, without any attachment to outcomes. It's simply love in action, expressing itself through whatever form is needed in the moment. Sometimes service looks like grand gestures, building hospitals, starting foundations, changing policies. Sometimes it looks like small acts of kindness, listening to a friend, helping a stranger, offering a smile to someone who looks lonely. The path of service taught me that freedom isn't something you achieve for yourself. It's something you give away until you realize there's no one left to give it to. Every time you serve without agenda, you weaken the grip of the ego that insists on separation. Every time you give without expectation, you discover that you already have everything you need. Every time you love without conditions, you find that love is the only condition necessary for joy. This is why service is the most efficient spiritual practice. It takes you out of the endless loop of self-improvement and self-concern and places you in direct contact with the reality of interconnection. It shows you that your liberation is intimately connected to the liberation of all beings. It reveals that the freedom you seek isn't something you possess, it's something you become by giving it away. The most radical realization you can have is that the person you think you are doesn't actually exist. Not in the way you imagine, anyway. The boundaries that seem to separate you from me, from the tree outside your window, from the stranger on the street, these are optical illusions of consciousness, mirages created by a mind that's learned to see division where there is actually only unity. I remember the first time this truth hit me with full force. I was sitting in meditation, and suddenly the Richard Alpert I'd been carrying around for 30-something years simply wasn't there. Not gone in a frightening way, but absent in the way that a wave is absent when you realize it's just ocean. The wave doesn't disappear, it just stops pretending it's separate from the water that forms it. This isn't a philosophical concept or a mystical theory. It's the most practical reality you'll ever encounter. Every moment of suffering you experience comes from the illusion that you're separate from what you need, separate from what you love, separate from what you are. Every moment of joy comes from the temporary dissolution of those boundaries, when you forget yourself so completely that there's no one left to be happy. There's just happiness itself. The illusion of separation is maintained by the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and who others are. He's different from me because he's rich and I'm poor. She's different from me because she's young and I'm old. They're different from me because they believe different things, come from different places, have different skin colors or sexual orientations or political views. But underneath all these surface differences, the same awareness is looking out through every pair of eyes. When I met my guru in India, I experienced this truth in a way that shattered my Western, individualistic worldview. Here was a man who seemed to know my thoughts before I thought them, who loved me before I'd done anything to earn it, who saw straight through every mask I'd ever worn. But the most shocking thing wasn't that he could see into me. It was that in his presence, I could see into him, and what I saw was myself. This recognition of unity doesn't erase the apparent differences between people. Your personality is still your personality. Your history is still your history. Your preferences are still your preferences. But you begin to hold these differences lightly, like costumes in a play rather than fundamental truths about reality. You can appreciate the unique expression of consciousness that flows through each person without forgetting that it's the same consciousness flowing through you. The practical implications of this understanding are profound. When you truly see that the homeless person on the street is yourself in different circumstances you can't walk past without offering help. When you recognize that the person who angers you is showing you a disowned part of yourself, you can't maintain your righteousness. When you realize that the person you love is literally another version of you, you can't help but love them without conditions. This doesn't mean you become a doormat or lose your ability to discern between healthy and unhealthy situations. It means you respond to everything from love rather than fear, from unity rather than separation, from wisdom rather than reactivity. You set boundaries not to protect yourself from others, but to create space for love to flow more freely. The ultimate joke of spiritual seeking is that you spend years trying to become someone special, someone enlightened, someone who has transcended the ordinary world, only to discover that there's no one there to become anything. The separate self that wanted to achieve enlightenment is revealed to be the very thing that was preventing it. When that self dissolves, what remains isn't a better version of you. It's the recognition that you were never separate from what you were seeking in the first place. Nothing lasts. Not your youth, not your health, not your relationships, not your achievements, not your problems, not your identity, not even your spiritual insights. Everything you can name, everything you can grasp, everything you can become attached to will eventually fade away like morning mist. This isn't a tragedy, it's the most liberating truth you'll ever encounter. Most people live in denial of impermanence, desperately trying to make permanent what is inherently temporary. We cling to our youth with expensive creams and surgeries. We grasp at relationships that have naturally run their course. We hold on to ideas about ourselves that no longer serve us. We try to freeze moments of happiness as if they could be preserved like photographs. But this clinging is exactly what causes our suffering. When my stroke happened, I was forced to confront impermanence in the most intimate way. The Ram Dass who could speak eloquently, who could move gracefully through the world, who could maintain the image of the wise teacher, that person was gone in an instant. At first, I grieved for who I could no longer be, but gradually I began to discover the freedom that comes from having your attachments forcibly removed. The stroke taught me that losing what you think you need can be the greatest gift life offers. Without my ability to perform my spirituality, I had to actually live it. Without my eloquence, I had to communicate through presence. Without my mobility, I had to find stillness. Without my image, I had to discover who I was beyond any role or identity. This is the secret of dancing with impermanence. Instead of fighting the changes that life brings, you learn to flow with them like a river flows around rocks. You discover that resistance to change is what creates suffering, not the change itself. You realize that holding on too tightly to anything, even the most beautiful experiences, is like trying to hold water in your hands. The practice of letting go isn't about becoming indifferent or detached. It's about loving so completely that you can release what you love when it's time to let it go. It's about enjoying the dance while it lasts without demanding that the music never end. It's about finding peace in the constant flux of existence, rather than trying to create islands of permanence in the ocean of change. When you truly accept impermanence, you stop postponing your happiness until conditions are perfect. You stop waiting for the right relationship, the right job, the right spiritual state before you allow yourself to be fully present. You realize that this moment, with all its imperfections and uncertainties, is the only moment you actually have. The most beautiful thing about impermanence is that it makes everything precious. If your loved ones were going to live forever, you might take them for granted. If your health were guaranteed, you might not appreciate your body. If your consciousness were permanent, you might not value this brief opportunity to experience being human. The fact that everything passes away is what makes everything sacred. Learning to dance with impermanence transforms your entire relationship with life. You begin to hold your plans lightly, your opinions provisionally, your identities playfully. You start to appreciate the exquisite poignancy of temporary things, the way afternoon light falls across a table, the sound of a friend's laughter, the feeling of being completely present in an ordinary moment.